That fits very nicely what Søren mentioned, the overall goal. But the specific goal of today, there's actually 3 goals, you could also say. One is to share the content and the vision with you that we've gotten so far. And that's especially, what we've had this morning, but also especially now with Pedro's introduction. And then secondly is to create or start the dialogue with you to then say, what are the next steps in going forward, and how do we specifically tailor that to the individual companies then? And that's the dialogue that we would like to start today. And then hopefully in going forward, you could show your interest in becoming active beneficiaries. So these are the 2 goals. And the third, you could say, is actually also getting your feedback, and your experience in working with collaborative solutions in the clean tech sector. So that sharing of experience and feedback on the work here, that's the third goal. But now the stage is yours, Pedro.
Yeah. Thank you, Anja. Thank you to Dan and Søren. It made my talk much easier to have all this background and this rationale of why we're here. Because what I want to show you now is this short glimpse into what we believe is the future of network-driven insights. So I will show you some ideas, some things that we have prototyped so far, and then we will hear your reactions. So this starts with this premise of, okay, we have, like what Søren said, we have technology transfer, we have open innovation, but sometimes it just does not work. So sometimes it is too limited. And we get to a saturation point because we can only reach so many people broadcasting messages. And if we search, we might be too narrow. So finding the right partner becomes a really difficult problem. And we can even see it during events like this ones and bigger events like wider conferences. You might be next to the person that is the right person to talk with, and you just don't talk with them. And even when you approach them and you might be talking with them, you don't know exactly what to talk about, because it might take a few minutes until you get to the point where you connect and you have the right problem, the right solution, and that is a probabilistic thing. So serendipity is fine, but we can aid serendipity, and we can aid it through a data-driven insights. And the other thing that plays a very important role here is this urgent need for more sustainable solutions, and sustainable from the 3 kind of ways in which we can think about sustainability. Of course, environmental sustainability is very important, it's at the core of what we're doing, and that's why we are kind of heading into the clean tech sector. But we also have in mind this idea of economic sustainability. So if we want to make Denmark more competitive, we need to use all the resources we have at hand and combine them as effectively as possible. But also, there is a societal aspect. We want more jobs in Denmark. So we want to recognize the capabilities we have internally so we can use them effectively. So those are kind of the 2 things that we're trying to balance roughly. So we have this big challenge. How we proactively identify collaboration partners to develop and deploy innovative and sustainable solutions to market. So this is the big challenge. And of course, we have been doing a lot of work in this direction before, and there are a lot of institutions and agencies that do a wonderful job. But in a very competitive world, we need to be even better and step up the game, because a lot of other countries are doing exactly the same. And this is where we need to recognize what is special about the setup in which we are. So I will argue that within Denmark, we have this very unique clean tech ecosystem that provides opportunities that are nowhere else. And if we really make something out of it through this data-driven insights, we might get much farther than where we are now. So some facts. We have over 1,200 clean tech-related companies with roughly 110,000 people involved in this company. So it's a relatively big market. It's a very big industry for a country of this size. So the density of companies in this clean tech area, given the size of the country, is quite high. Then it's not only that we have a lot of things going on in the clean tech industry, we have a very diverse clean tech industry. So some countries might focus on solar, some countries might focus on wave power or other technologies. But here we have almost all the spectrum, and that's quite a unique opportunity. Then, not only that, we have several institutions, several research institutions working in clean tech and heavily supported to work in this clean tech space. And they are also relatively close together. We also have from the government very clear guidelines in terms of supporting clean tech and R&D, which other countries have in in the general sense, but here clean tech is certainly a strategic area. Then we have also high trust levels. Not only high trust level, but also in general, is one of the best countries to do business in, and often appears within the 5 top in the world. So that generates a lot of opportunities to connect with people using this trust, using the advantage that you don't need to first have kind of this due diligence that might take months and months. You can start by trusting the other. We have very short distances in comparison with other countries, and that makes collaboration easier, at least in theory. And on top of that, it's incredible the amount of open data that Denmark has been putting on the public sphere. So you have CVR data sets, you have the tax data, and you have a lot of institutions and agencies, such as the State of Green, harvesting and creating data sets that then are also public. So if we make something with all this combination of factors, we can get very far. So in a way, we have all these Lego pieces that are really, really powerful, but some of them need to be connected proactively. Things won't happen just by chance. So it is both good and bad to have so many opportunities, because you can also miss a lot of them and never realize that you miss them. So that becomes a challenge in its own right, because on the other side, Denmark doesn't have a huge market internally, and the capitals and things of that sort might not be the key advantage. So the advantage is all these technology pieces, these knowledge pieces, that can be recombined. But the recombination, to create this recombinant innovation, is not so easy. So a way of seeing this problem is, well, what we have, and we have done very well, is to set up all, or kind of survey all what we have. So in a way, we have created this census of every single thing that is in Denmark, and we have that data. And that's very powerful. But we want to go to, and we know intuitively that we want to go in a direction that is more about systems thinking. We want to see how these things are connected. And we want to go in a direction that is more evidence-based decision making. So we want to use data. But if we have so much data that we cannot really even kind of make sense out of it, that doesn't help too much. So in a way, something that is missing in this kind of idea is the idea of data analysis and visualization. So if we do clever data analysis and visualization, we might pick up all these huge amounts of data and produce a handful of visualizations, of views of the data that allow us to have real network insights. So in a way, we want to transition from this picture where we have all the elements to a picture that has the elements but also has how the things are connected. Because then we might spot things that we didn't see before. And we might draw lines that otherwise we won't be able to do. And in a way of setting also the scene of this problem is to think about a collaboration funnel. So when we have a lot of opportunities, this collaboration funnel in the beginning is very broad. So we have a lot of opportunities for exploration right here in the beginning of the funnel. And then once we explore, once we kind of get our heads around what is going on, we might want to search specifically. But if we search right away, then we're putting keywords that might not be the right ones. So it's very important to have this exploration phase first, then move to search. After that, we can start going through the first contacts, setting up different meetings. Then we can connect and coordinate, which is much more involved and is a real investment there. And then the active collaboration happens, and the collaboration outputs and the revision can happen. But what if we get all the way here and the partner was not the right one? We invested a lot of money, a lot of effort, and we might not do it again, because if it doesn't work, we might think, collaboration does not work. I don't want to do it again. I will just close my doors in the company and work with the people I have. I know how to do it. So there is a very important risk in when you fail in this stage, because you don't realize until it's too late. And even when it's too late, you might not realize that the problem was here. So in a way, NetSites aims at working in this space, where at the level of exploration and the very initial search process, you might broaden up your mind. You might connect dots that otherwise will be disconnected. And of course, we're not alone in this collaboration funnel. And what is really interesting is that there is already a pipeline here. So we have a State of Green, very heavily in search and certainly in exploration. They have already done quite a few things here. Clean, like a very important clean tech network. They not only help in search, first contact, but also in connect and coordinate, and even further on in the process, depending on the kind of project. And then we have Industry in Fund, also through funding, helping to generate concrete collaboration opportunities, but also supporting other people in the pipeline. So what we're saying is we're not creating a new organization of a sort, but rather we are trying to embed capabilities early on in this funnel, so all the organizations that already exist can do something that we believe can be more powerful and more efficient. In terms of each of these potential users of net sites, well, on the one hand, we have these private companies, these private organizations, where they should find in net sites a place where to find new products, product development partners, for example, potential customers and allies, and providers, insights about the way in which technologies and capabilities are embedded in this Danish industrial ecosystem. So we can start also using it for strategic purposes. Then we have industry bodies and other innovation agencies, where here is about looking at the whole, trying to identify this whole map of the Danish clean tech network as a spectrum of technologies, trying to use that also for strategy, perhaps even for policy making. And then we can support inter-organizational project execution through improved matchmaking. So for example, if you run an event, you might want to pre-select who is going based on what is this kind of ideal team. And we will see some of the factors that we believe are important in that sense. And then identify new uncharted collaboration opportunities. So if you identify that in this space nothing has happened, but we believe, given what we have seen in the data, that there is an interesting opportunity, you might put together these actors. You might help putting them together strategically upfront. And then we have researchers, because like we are researchers, and we believe we can also contribute, and we can let other colleagues contribute. So in the platform, our colleagues could identify new research opportunities and connect with the right companies when they are doing research, or narrow down their research to where is more important, acquire data for new research, so our data sources will be open data, and also further develop the open source tool running NetSite. So we will also be open source. So the question might be, I hope by now you are kind of convinced, but still, why should we look outside our comfort zone? So I will show you a few examples where it makes the whole difference. One, Tesla. So they are, yes, a car manufacturer, but they are in the energy storage business. Almost all their efforts are, in fact, in R&D related with energy storage systems, because their batteries are their key competitive advantage. When they jump in the wagon of doing electric cars, a lot of things were sorted. The motors and a lot of other things were easy, but batteries were far from being sorted. So they became a car manufacturer, but in fact, all their R&D and a lot of the very important things they do is in energy storage systems. Then we have Skype, which is kind of an interesting example, and you might think, why did you select it? Well, for a couple of reasons. First, because it's a very international endeavor that in fact started with a Dane and a Swede and a couple of Estonians, so that's kind of an interesting story of international, and a lot of people does not know that Skype in fact was born here in Denmark. But also because in reality, although they are kind of IP telephony, you can call it, their key competitive advantage in the beginning was to bridge to the old technology. So they allow you in the very beginning to connect to landlines from an IP phone. And that required a lot of kind of technology insights from an older technological area that for most people operating in the IP space, in the IP telephony space, was unknown, and they didn't want to touch it. Then we have Nokia. Well, I know now it's not the most successful case right now, but it is amazing how they moved from one technological space to the other, and literally going from paper mills to telecom, jumping from one technology space to the other with an amazing capacity to identify opportunities and connect the dots in these opportunities. And then we have Amazon, which started as a online library, but in fact it's a logistic business, and they have invested a lot of money in logistics. So being originally a library, an online library, were in fact about logistics. So they managed to connect dots in technology areas that were totally different. So that's the first 4 set of examples. But I have a story that I believe is even more interesting than that one. I know some of you might have heard this because I have talked with some of you before. So the ones that have heard about it, don't answer right away. But what do you believe happens when you combine bacon and beer? Any guess for the ones that haven't heard this story before?
Put on weight.
Sorry?
You put on weight.
Yeah, that's true. There is a health factor there, yeah? Any other guess? Well, the very interesting fact is that when you combine beer and bacon, you get one of the biggest producers of insulin, well, the biggest producer of insulin in the world, one of the biggest companies in the world, Novo Nordisk. And how did this happen? It's so weird. But there are very good reasons to believe that the fact why Novo Nordisk appear here in Denmark, Novo and Nordisk separately, like the 2 biggest insulin manufacturers before separated, they happened to appear here in Denmark. It is because there were inherent capabilities here that made this possible. So you extract insulin from the pancreas of pigs. That was the original way of doing it. And you don't only extract the insulin from there, but you need to have a lot of know-how from the veterinary industry. You need to have this know-how, and that was something that Denmark built for years. The main trade was with the UK in terms of bacon and butter for centuries. So that was really strong here. Then we have beer. Not only the process of fermentation is important for a lot of the biotech industry, but also the capabilities to manufacture the machines that do this fermentation. And when you combine all these capabilities, you are almost doomed to have this amazing company. Now, it could have not happened if very smart people have not connected the dots. But it fortunately did happen. And we ended up with, actually this figure is a bit old, it's more than 150 billion US dollars, their market cap. And this is more than twice what Statoil in Norway is their market cap. So it's quite a big thing. And it happened because you combine effectively 2 things that other countries either didn't have or were not sufficiently insightful to connect. Now, we are also connecting the dots, and these are some of our previous research. We have been kind of exploring these ideas of how networks influence different aspects of design and research and development. And in fact, back in 2012, we started looking at the clean tech industry in terms of connecting companies and the technology subsector. So we started back then with some work. And then also back then we started working with Copenhagen Clean Tech Cluster, with different innovation networks in the clean tech area. We approached back then in 2012 State of Green. We have worked with Liquitech, with BWE, and in the UK with Nesta. And with all of them, we applied this network approach. And it was very interesting, but we kind of bumped into some limitations. And the limitations were that it was not too scalable. So with NetSites, we want to take the next step, which is first, the user is in control of analyzing the data. It's very user-friendly. We don't need to be the intermediaries when it comes to people getting network insights. So we are kind of opening up that space and creating new possibilities and much more scalable possibilities. So coming now to very concrete terms, what do we believe, given previous research, given our previous experience, are key factors for successful collaborations? I will argue that there are 4 key aspects. One is technology. So when you approach somebody to collaborate in new product development or to do new products or services, obviously you're looking for some sort of technology, some sort of know-how that is there. So that's particularly important. And depending on what you're looking for, it might be far from your own technology area or it might be close. But that is definitely a factor. Then we have this idea of relational closeness. So when we want to approach somebody, it matters if we have worked with them before. We know that it might make things much easier. So this idea of relational closeness does matter, but it can play also again. So yes, I might want to collaborate with somebody that I have collaborated before, but I already know a lot of things they know because I have collaborated before with them. So sometimes you need to open up and go beyond people that you have collaborated before, and this needs to be a conscious choice. Then, of course, geographical closeness. How close two companies, two organizations are can make things way easier, but again, they might know exactly the same things because they are close. So there is a balance. And we know that if two companies are a couple of blocks from each other versus 5 kilometers, that already makes a lot of difference. So imagine when it's 100 kilometers or more. And then there are a number of organizational variables, some of them easy to quantify, some of them not so easy to quantify, that gives you ideas about the size of the company, the processes that the company have, and we will see a bit more in detail in a second. But it's not only the success factors. As we said, it depends. And it depends on what? It depends on the characteristics of the project that you are trying, or the challenge that you're trying to solve. So one thing that you need to have in consideration is this project or about incremental innovation or about radical innovation? If it is about incremental innovation, perhaps I will take it easy, go to people that are around me, that are close technologically, close geographically, and will make my life way easier. Technological maturity. Is this something that I am very confident about already? The technology I understand very well, and therefore perhaps I dare going much further away and explore how I can combine with different things? Or it's really immature, meaning that I cannot really gamble too much with combining and integrating different things. And then, of course, we have time and budget constraints. So if we have really tight budget and time constraints, we might need to kind of tinker around with these other variables about the collaboration factors in a different way. So at the end is this idea that one size does not fit all. We need to find a right balance, and what we want to do with NetSites is to provide you the opportunity to create your own network, your own balance, to identify the key actors based on what we know matters when it comes to collaboration. And what we're doing is starting with the rich data sets that we already have and try to see if they can tell us a different story from the story that has been already told. So I will now show you very early kind of sketchy examples of what can be done. One of the limitations of this thing is that when you show them statically, it's really hard to understand them. So bear with me on that thing, but it will give you a glimpse about how these things look like. One advantage of network analysis is it's very colorful and flashy, so people at least are drawn to the network because it has an aesthetic kind of interest. But we will see if we can make some interesting points. So this is the first analysis we ran back in 2012 with a data set that was like a third of the data set that now State of Green has. But already then we could see some interesting features. So what you see here, the colored circles here are subsectors, industry subsectors, and then the gray nodes are companies. Doesn't matter the high detail, just want you to have an overall picture. So companies are connected with subsectors because they work in the subsectors. And if two companies are very close in the graph, it's because they share subsectors. So they are kind of, from a point of view of know-how, close. So that's an indicator of technological similarity. Okay? And what we see here at first glance is all technology pieces in Denmark are somehow connected. There is nothing that is floating around in the space. There is a route between each piece of technology that crosses different companies. And if you want to put it like the further distances here, for example, we have water-related technologies here, and we have wind over here. And there is a route. It's a bit further than the route that exists between energy efficiency and intelligent energy. They are much closer together. And it kind of makes sense. But when you start looking at this in this way, you might start thinking about new products and services with companies that already are there, that you can knock their door effectively. And one of the first insights that we saw from here is that, for example, the wind sector, we know it's a massive clean tech area in Denmark. However, it's kind of detaching slowly from the core. Why did this happen? Is because it's more mature, it's more specialized, and therefore kind of has its own set of technologies. And the risk is that they don't connect anymore with new technologies, and therefore we miss opportunities. So this is one kind of insight that we can see, and the other is that, yeah, what I say, heating and cooling, energy efficiency, intelligent energy, they are very much at the center because they are very flexible technologies and they are evolving all the time, very fastly evolving. And just to show you one example, and this is kind of a cartoon example, but I think it makes the point. If we take KK Electronic over here, which is a company that produces control systems for wind turbines, both software and hardware. And then actually they changed the name from then to KK Wind something systems. They are in their neighbors, companies that work in electronic control systems and mechanical components and generators, okay? So we have Metatechnic, which in fact is a kind of a close competitor. We have CC Jensen, that they produce filters for oil in these wind turbines, among other things. And we have ABN Energy that works with hydraulics, okay? So you could think that in a world where you want to have a project that is about incremental innovation, you might try to look into this set of factors around KK Electronic. And if it is really, really close and you are willing to collaborate with your competitor, you might go to Metatechnic, or you might see, well, how my control systems might integrate better with hydraulics. Just one example. But so this will be about connecting the dots within the wind sector. But what if you dare to do something a bit more radical? You might be KK Electronic and you might say, you know what, I am heavily based in the wind sector, but I believe that my control systems can be applied in the solar industry, in photovoltaics, because it's not so far-fetched. How do I get there? So I am currently not too close in terms of these different technology pieces, but I think I can do something. Then I can start looking at different routes to do that. And it happens to be that Draca produces these specialized power cables, and they work for both photovoltaics and the wind industry. And you might not necessarily co-develop with them something, but you might contact them in order to get insights about this other sector that is very specialized, and something might happen. But at least you know who to contact that already has contact in both sides. That's one example. Now, from the time where we did this analysis, a lot of things have happened, and we are also daring to put much more data in our models. And this is one example of one really sketchy model that I'm working on now, where you see much more companies, much more subsectors. And if you zoom, for example, in here now, the wind sector before was there, but it's just a rotation, right? You can see the actual companies, you can see how these different subsectors interlock, and you might even identify within the wind sector and their subsectors clusters. So how within the subsectors there are regions and different areas. Now, going to the geographical landscape. This is just a map showing each dot is an organization. Sometimes they overlap, of course, and showing how these clean tech organizations are spread all over the place. And in this case, you can see that some are business, some are institutions, some are organizations, some are public sector. Now, if you just put it in the map and then you have a network graph on the other side, it might not work. So what you need to do is integrate this information. So you can also think in terms of regions. Each region has its own, or city, has its own mini industry with a particular signature, a particular way in which they organize technologies. And that can be used, so you can think in terms of each city as their own little world. And you can also think about the relational landscape. So we have some clues about collaborations between companies. We're very lucky that the State of Green focus in solutions, because solutions provide the key way to identify when a company works with another company because they happen to collaborate in the same solution. So we can already plot and see that there are clusters of companies that have worked together. We have concrete data that they work together, and we can also use that in our network models to take that in consideration. And if you want to work with somebody that you have worked before, that is close geographically, and that is close in technology, we can tinker around the network to show you exactly that subset. Then in terms of organizational variables, there are other things that we also can take in consideration. For example, size. Sometimes if you are a very big company, you might want to work with another very big company because processes will match and there is something there. But sometimes it might be the opposite. Sometimes you feel like I want something more agile, so I will connect with a smaller company on purpose. Then the type of organization. We have universities, we have private companies, we have public sector agencies, and so on. And sometimes we want a constellation. We don't want just to identify one company, but if we are doing a consortium, for example, we want to find a set of companies that might be the ideal, and we can help with that. Then the time since foundation, how old is a company, also tells you something about the nature of the company, and we have data for that. And then the structure and processes. So this is a bit more tricky to have data about, but we are looking into how to identify clues that might allow you to tell something about the structure and processes. So in summary, we can think about all what I have told you just before in terms of three key ways to think about this problem. One is data-driven. So we believe in a bottom-up approach driven by large amounts of data to generate new insights. But it's not just about a lot of data. It's about going from counting to connecting. Our goal is to reveal the hidden connection and opportunities between otherwise disconnected possibilities. And then when we combine these two things, we can really go from organizations to ecosystems. Think about the whole of Denmark as an ecosystem that has all these clean tech companies and other companies, so we can generate recombinant innovation to change the focus from this one-to-one relationship or seeing one company at a time to seeing a set. And when we put all these pieces together, it's not only about the clean tech industry anymore. We can allow companies outside the clean tech industry to become more sustainable because they can identify who to approach given their particular characteristics.